Christmas lights glowed behind the frosted windows of the Carter mansion when Noah heard his father's final words, "Pack your things. You're not part of this family anymore." What his father didn't know was that the failure he'd just disowned would soon build a $50 million empire from a freezing one-bedroom apartment. Snow fell in lazy spirals over Brookfield, a town that smelled of pine and old money. Inside the Carter house, the air was thick with cinnamon, laughter, and quiet contempt. Noah Carter, 22, the youngest son of steel magnate Richard Carter, stood near the fireplace clutching a mug of cocoa he hadn't tasted. "Hey there, my amazing family. Welcome back. Get comfortable, grab a drink, and settle in, because today's story is going to pull at your heart in all the right ways." If you're excited already, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Tomorrow, I've got another powerful story waiting for you. And trust me, you won't want to miss it. His older siblings, Chase and Marissa, were the kind of confidence that came from generational wealth. They compared bonuses, ski trips, and luxury watches, their voices loud enough to drown out the soft jazz drifting from the stereo. Richard Carter sat in his leather chair, a glass of scotch in one hand, disappointment in the other. He'd built the Carter empire from the ground up, or so he reminded everyone, and he expected his children to continue it. All but one did. Noah, the quiet one, had dropped out of MIT 2 years earlier to work on something in tech, a decision his father called a tantrum disguised as ambition. Richard hadn't forgiven him. When dinner ended, the patriarch raised his glass. "To family success," he said. Everyone echoed him except Noah. Richard's gaze hardened. "No toast, son." Noah set his glass down gently. "I'll drink when success means more than money." Laughter rippled through the table, cruel and careless. "Listen to the philosopher," Chase snorted. "He's probably coding another failure in Mom's basement." Marissa smirked. "Maybe Santa will bring you an investor." Their father's glare silenced them. "Enough," he said. Then, to Noah, "You're 22, living on handouts, chasing fantasies. I built this family on discipline, not dreams." Noah's hand shook, but his voice didn't. "You build it on fear." The room went still. Even the fireplace seemed to hold its breath. Richard rose slowly, the kind of slow that promised finality. "Pack your things," he said. "If you think you can build a life without my name, do it. But don't come back when the world freezes you out." No one moved. No one defended him. Not even his mother, who sat staring at her napkin, lips pressed thin to keep from trembling. Noah left before she could look up. Snow squeaked under his boots as he crossed the driveway. His car's heater didn't work, but the cold felt cleaner than the air inside that house. He drove toward the city, headlights cutting through sleet, mind spiraling between rage and resolve. His father's words replayed like static. "Don't come back." He didn't. A week later, Noah rented a crumbling apartment above a laundromat downtown. The radiator hissed, but never warmed. He set up a second-hand desk, an ancient laptop, and a dream he couldn't quite explain to anyone yet. He called his project Frostbite, a cloud-based cybersecurity tool meant to protect small businesses. The irony wasn't lost on him. Frozen, forgotten, and building something to keep others safe. Days blurred into nights. He coded until his fingers ached, fueled by instant noodles and bitterness. He pawned his watch, sold his old guitar, skipped rent more than once. But every line of code felt like defiance. When loneliness crept in, he replayed the Christmas dinner in his mind, the laughter, the humiliation, and let it harden into fuel. By spring, he had a prototype. He pitched it to investors, who smiled politely and ghosted him. He failed 12 times. On the 13th, a quiet venture fund run by a woman named Elena Price called back. Her voice on the phone was calm, but curious. "You built this alone?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because no one believed I could." She laughed softly. "Good answer. Coming Monday." When Noah hung up, the radiator clanked once, almost in approval. Monday came, and so did the snow again, thin, drifting, familiar. He wore the only suit he owned, a Christmas gift from his mother years before. The office was sleek, glass everywhere. Elena Price looked nothing like the executives he'd begged before. She listened more than she spoke. After 20 minutes, she said, "It's raw, but it's brilliant. I'll take a chance. One condition. If this becomes something, promise me you'll remember where you came from." He thought of his father's mansion, the smell of scotch and rejection. "I'll remember," he said. That night, he signed his first deal. Frostbite officially existed. 3 years later, the company protected thousands of clients worldwide. Revenue crossed $50 million before Noah turned 25. His face appeared on tech magazines. His name whispered in boardrooms that once wouldn't take his calls. But he stayed anonymous, operating under the brand, rarely showing himself publicly. The world knew Frostbite Technologies. No one knew it belonged to the boy his father had thrown out at Christmas. Yet success didn't silence the ache. Every December, he found himself staring at blank walls, wondering if the Carters still celebrated without him, if his mother still placed his ornament on the tree. He never called. Pride built higher walls than wealth ever could. Until one December morning, 4 years later, an email arrived from his mother. Subject line, "Please come home." He read it 3 times. Then he closed the laptop, heart hammering against the armor he'd built. Outside, snow began to fall again, exactly the way it had the night he left. For years had turned Noah Carter from a college dropout into a name whispered in tech circles. To the world, he was the anonymous genius behind Frostbite. To his family, he was still the failure who had walked out on Christmas Eve. For years, Noah avoided Brookfield. He lived in boardrooms, airports, and the quiet hum of data centers, convincing himself that success had replaced belonging. But when his mother's email arrived, "Please come home," something cracked through the frost he'd built around his heart. He told himself he was only going for her. He didn't know anyone else a thing. The drive back felt foreign. Luxury cars passed his Tesla, the same roads lined with mansions that had once made him feel small. Every turn tightened his chest. When the Carter estate finally appeared, its roof dusted in snow, its windows glowing like memory, he parked but didn't get out right away. He watched the lights flicker through the curtains, laughter echoing faintly even through closed windows. Something's never changed. Finally, he stepped out, adjusted his coat, and walked up the long drive. Each footstep sounded like a ghost revisiting the living. His mother, Linda, opened the door before he could knock. Her hair was streaked with silver now, her eyes rimmed red from tears that looked too fresh to be old. For a second, she just stared. Then she whispered, "No." He nodded, suddenly unable to speak. She pressed a hand to her mouth and pulled him into a trembling hug. "I prayed you'd answer," she said. "I almost didn't," he admitted. "I know," she whispered. "That's why I kept praying." Inside, the house smelled of pine and cinnamon again, exactly like the night he left. The family portrait still hung over the mantel, except now, his face had been replaced by an updated one of Chase and his wife. He glanced at it, but said nothing. Linda noticed and touched his arm. "Your father thought it would be easier." Noah's voice was soft. "Easier for who?" From the next room came footsteps. Richard Carter appeared, older but no less formidable. His gray hair was neatly combed, his suit pressed even on Christmas Eve. For a long moment, father and son just stared at each other, 2 men bound by blood, divided by pride. Richard broke the silence first. "So," he said, "you got my wife's email." "I did. I didn't send it." "I know." The tension in the air could have frozen the fire still burning behind them. Chase entered next, followed by Marissa, their expressions a mix of surprise and discomfort. Marissa's husband whispered, "Is that?" Chase cut him off. "Yeah, the prodigal coder." Noah ignored him. "I came to see Mom," he said quietly. "Not to start anything." Richard folded his arms. "Then say your hellos and go." We don't need another scene. But Linda wouldn't have it. Richard, enough. He's your son. He was, Richard said coldly. Until he chose otherwise. Noah's jaw tightened. You chose for me the moment you threw me out. The room fell silent again, the same silence that had swallowed their last conversation years ago. Only this time, Noah didn't look away. He met his father's gaze and saw something new. Weariness, maybe even regret, hiding beneath the armor. Linda tried to break the tension. Dinner's almost ready, she said softly. Please, all of you. It's Christmas. They sat, but conversation stayed shallow. Chase talked about the family business, Marissa about her charity gala. Noah listened, nodding occasionally, pretending not to notice how often his father avoided looking at him. When dessert arrived, Linda tried one last time. Noah, she said gently, what have you been doing all these years? He hesitated, glancing at Richard. Working. On what? Marissa asked, her tone half-mocking. Still chasing your little coding hobby. He smiled faintly. Something like that. Before he could say more, his father interrupted. I hope you've learned that dreams don't pay bills, Richard said. Noah's voice stayed calm. Mine did. That earned a few uneasy looks around the table. But before anyone could press him, he stood. Thanks for dinner, he said quietly. It was good to see you, Mom. He left before she could stop him. Outside, snow began to fall again. The next morning, Noah sat in his car outside a downtown cafe, laptop open, coffee going cold. He reread his mother's message for the 100th time. Please come home. He already had, but nothing about it felt like home. Across the street, the local paper's front window caught his eye. A bold headline glowed behind glass. Frostbite Technologies announces expansion to Brookfield. Below was a small photo of a new headquarters being renovated, just 10 blocks away. The reporter called Frostbite one of the fastest-growing cybersecurity firms in the country. Noah smiled faintly. His father would soon learn the company his bank had been trying to court for months was owned by the son he'd thrown out. By noon, word had spread through Brookfield's business circles that Frostbite's founder was coming to town. Investors whispered, bankers speculated, and Richard Carter's phone began to buzz. He didn't yet know the name behind the company. He only knew Frostbite had outbid him on a major contract. At dinner that night, Chase mentioned it first. Some tech company just bought the old Midtown Tower. Frostbite or something. Supposed to be worth a fortune. Richard frowned. They're the ones beating us out on defense contracts. Bunch of kids with laptops. Linda set down her fork. Maybe those kids know something you don't. He ignored her. We'll see how long their luck lasts. Upstairs, Noah's mother quietly sent a text she wasn't sure she should send. I'm proud of you. 2 days later, invitations went out for Frostbite's official headquarters opening. The local elite received sleek black envelopes embossed with a silver snowflake. One of them arrived at the Carter mansion. Richard assumed it was a mistake. Chase was curious. Marissa said it had to be a marketing ploy. Linda said nothing, only watched her husband's face tighten as he read the embossed signature at the bottom. Noah Carter, founder and CEO, Frostbite Technologies. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to collapse the chandelier. Richard's hand trembled. This is a joke. It isn't, Linda said softly. He built it. Alone. Chase whistled low. Guess the dropout wasn't so useless after all. Marissa's husband muttered. 50 million valuation, at least. Richard stood slowly, the letter crackling in his fist. He's using my name to embarrass me. Linda looked at him, tired but firm. No, Richard. He's finally using his own. On the day of the launch, half the city turned up. Reporters, investors, and politicians filled the renovated tower lobby. Glass, steel, and light reflecting off every surface. Cameras flashed as the founder approached the podium. When Noah stepped onto the stage, murmurs rippled through the crowd. He wore a simple black suit, no tie, no arrogance, just calm. He glanced toward the back where his family stood, uninvited but expected. 4 years ago, he began, someone told me that when the world freezes you out, you either break or build something strong enough to survive the cold. He paused, letting the words settle. Frostbite began in a one-room apartment above a laundromat. Tonight, it stands here because failure isn't the opposite of success. It's the first draft of it. Applause filled the hall. Richard lowered his head. His wife's hand found his, but he didn't squeeze back. Noah closed with a simple line. To anyone who's ever been told they weren't enough, thank you. You were wrong. The room erupted. After the ceremony, Linda approached first. Her eyes were wet, her smile small but proud. You did it, she whispered. He nodded. We both survived. Chase offered a handshake, awkward but sincere. Marissa managed a strained congratulations. Richard stayed at the back, staring at the Frostbite logo glowing above the stage. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. You built all this without us. Noah met his gaze. Because of you. Richard winced, then straightened his tie. I underestimated you. No, Noah said quietly. You didn't see me at all. He turned away before emotion could betray him. That night, the first snow of the season fell over Brookfield again. Inside the Frostbite Tower, the light stayed on long after midnight, a beacon in the same cold his father had once warned him about. Success changes everything, except the people who refuse to change with it. After the Frostbite launch, Noah's name spread through Brookfield like wildfire. News outlets ran stories, investors called nonstop, and reporters labeled him the hometown prodigy who proved his family wrong. Everyone wanted a quote, a headline, a soundbite. Everyone except the Carters. Richard Carter didn't mention his son's company once, not even when board members congratulated him on raising such a visionary. He deflected every compliment, changing the subject to quarterly reports or the weather. In private, though, the silence ate him alive. He read every article, every interview, every glowing review that used to be reserved for him. Frostbite was now a household name. The company's logo hung over billboards across the state. And each time Richard saw that blue snowflake, his chest tightened. It wasn't envy. It was the quiet horror of realizing he had been wrong. Noah stayed busy. Expansion contracts, charity proposals, interview requests. He juggled them all with quiet precision. But inside, he wasn't celebrating. Every victory felt muted, every accolade hollow. At night, when the world went still, he'd glance at his phone expecting a message that never came. Not from his investors, from his father. The text never arrived. On Christmas Eve, exactly 5 years since the night he'd been kicked out, Noah received a formal invitation in the mail. Gold lettering, wax seal, heavy paper. It read, "The Carter family requests the honor of your presence at the annual Christmas gala." He stared at it for a long time. Part of him wanted to burn it. Another part whispered that maybe this was finally the apology he'd never heard. He showed up wearing the same black suit from Frostbite's launch. No press, no entourage, just himself. The Carter mansion looked the same. White lights dripping from the eaves, the same tree in the foyer. But inside, the atmosphere was different. Polished smiles, cautious glances, whispers that followed him like perfume. Chase approached first, holding a drink. "Guess we were wrong about you." "Huh," he said, trying to sound casual. Noah smiled. "Guess so." Marissa joined, looping her arm through her husband's. "You really should have told us. We would have invested." He laughed softly. "You already did." Every insult was motivation. Their smiles faltered. They didn't know whether he was joking. At the far end of the room stood Richard, his posture straight, his expression unreadable. When their eyes met, time slowed. For a moment, it was Christmas Eve all over again, just colder. Richard raised his glass slightly. "To family," he said. The gesture looked polite enough, but the words stung. Noah excused himself before the ache could show on his face. He found his mother in the study, away from the noise. She was arranging photo frames on the desk. "Old pictures," she said softly when she saw him. "Before the fights, before all of this." He picked one up. It was from the Christmas before everything broke. A younger him smiling beside his father, hand on a model airplane. They both looked proud then, before pride became poison. "You were his favorite," Linda whispered. "That's why it hurts so much." Noah blinked hard. "Does he know that?" "Not anymore," she said. "He can't admit it." Outside, laughter rose from the dining room. Louder now, fueled by wine and nostalgia. Inside, Noah stood still, caught between resentment and love. He wanted to forgive, but forgiveness requires honesty, and honesty had never lived comfortably in this house. When he finally left the study, Richard was waiting in the hallway. Neither spoke. Richard's shadow stretched down the corridor, taller than the man himself. He spoke first, his voice gravel and pride. "You've done well for yourself," he said. "I'll give you that." Noah met his gaze. "That almost sounds like approval." "It's acknowledgement," Richard said. "Don't read more into it." Noah's lips curved into something between a smile and a sigh. "I stopped reading into your word a long time ago." They faced each other in silence. Two versions of the same man, one hardened by legacy, the other by exile. Richard's tone softened just slightly. "I didn't throw you out because I hated you, Noah. I did it because I thought failure would teach you." "It did," Noah said, "but it also taught me what love shouldn't feel like." Richard flinched. "You were always too sensitive." "No," Noah said quietly. "I just didn't mistake cruelty for strength." They stood inches apart now, the hum of the party muffled behind the walls. Richard looked tired for the first time, years of ambition etched into the lines around his eyes. He took a breath. "I wanted you to earn what you have, not just inherit it." "I did earn it," Noah replied. "Every sleepless night, every door slammed in my face, every insult that came from your mouth. I earned it without you." Richard's voice cracked. "And look what it made you cold." Noah's jaw tightened. "You made me cold when you kicked me out in a snowstorm." The silence that followed cut deeper than any argument. Downstairs, music swelled and laughter grew louder, but neither moved. Finally, Noah stepped back. "I came tonight because Mom asked me to, not for your approval." Richard nodded slowly. "You've made that clear." Noah hesitated, searching his father's face for something. Remorse, regret, anything. He found none, only exhaustion. He turned toward the door. As he reached for his coat, Richard spoke again, barely above a whisper. "Do you hate me?" Noah stopped, his back still to him. "No," he said. "I just don't need you anymore." He left without another word. Outside, snowflakes drifted through the air like static. The cold bit at his skin, but it didn't sting this time. He walked down the long driveway, each step a release. By the time he reached his car, his phone buzzed. A message from his mother. "I'm sorry." He's just scared of losing control. Noah typed back. He already did. He just doesn't know it yet. He didn't hit send. Instead, he pocketed the phone and looked up at the mansion glowing behind him. It looked smaller now, no longer the mountain he'd once tried to climb. Back in the house, Richard returned to the study. He poured himself another drink, but didn't touch it. On the desk lay the family photo Linda had been cleaning earlier. For a long time, he stared at the smiling boy beside him, the one he'd pushed away. His reflection in a glass looked older, lonelier. He whispered into the empty room, "I wanted you to be better than me." The house didn't answer. It never did. Noah drove through quiet streets lit by Christmas lights, their glow flickering against the windshield. He didn't feel victorious. He felt emptied out, like someone who had finally told the truth and learned that truth doesn't always heal. It just frees you. When he reached the city limits, he whispered to himself, "This time, I'll build something for me." And for the first time in years, he believed it. 2 months passed after the Christmas gala. The Carter mansion had returned to silence. but inside its walls, pride still haunted every room. Richard buried himself in work. Linda stopped asking if he had called Noah. And Noah? He threw himself deeper into frostbite, until fate dragged the two men back into orbit once more. It began with a contract. The Carter Group had been lobbying for a major government cybersecurity deal, one that would keep their aging empire relevant in a digital world. The bid was competitive, the requirements strict, and the decision final. When the results came in, Richard's assistant froze. "The contract went to Frostbite Technologies," she said, voice small. Richard's pen slipped from his hand. He didn't react, not outwardly. But inside, something twisted, the same bitter mix of pride and humiliation he'd been choking down since the launch. "Schedule a meeting," he said flatly, "with their CEO." His assistant blinked. "Sir, that's Noah Carter." "I know who he is," Richard snapped. A week later, father and son sat across from each other in Frostbite's glass conference room, surrounded by city skyline. Noah looked perfectly at home. Richard did not. "This could be mutually beneficial," Richard said, voice even. "I'm listening," Noah replied. "You have the contract. We have manufacturing capabilities and global reach. We could combine resources." Noah leaned back in his chair, studying him. "You mean you want it on what you once called a fantasy?" Richard's jaw tightened. "I underestimated your potential." "No," Noah said. "You dismissed it." Silence filled the room. Employees walking past slowed down, sensing the quiet tension that thickened the air. Finally, Noah spoke again. "I don't make business decisions out of pity, Dad." Richard exhaled through his nose. "I'm not asking for pity. I'm offering strategy." Noah tilted his head. "And I'm offering truth. You want this deal because your company is fading. I read the reports." His father's glare flickered between anger and shame. "Watch your tone, son. I stopped being your son the night you locked the door behind me." The meeting ended with a handshake that meant nothing. But Frostbite's board later advised Noah to reconsider. Partnership with Carter Industries could open global channels. The logic was sound. The heart wasn't. For 2 days, Noah avoided the decision. He walked along the harbor, phone buzzing with reminders he ignored. He knew the right business move was to partner. He just didn't know if he could stomach sitting across from a man who'd once told him he'd never make it. By the 3rd day, he called his lawyer and said, "Draw up the joint venture papers." For the next 6 months, the Carters and Frostbite worked together, uneasily, professionally, constantly. Meetings, travel, shared presentations, forced proximity. Richard rarely spoke outside of strategy sessions. Noah kept everything polite, distant. To outsiders, they looked like a powerful duo. To anyone close enough to listen, their silence was almost visible. Linda watched from afar, sending occasional texts that Noah sometimes answered, sometimes didn't. She knew reconciliation had to happen on their terms, or not at all. At one meeting in D.C., late at night, after everyone else had gone, Richard walked into the conference room where Noah was reviewing numbers. "You're doing well," he said quietly. Noah didn't look up. "You said that last time." "Because it's true." Noah glanced up finally. "Then say you're proud of me." Richard hesitated. The words formed, but years of ego caught them before they escaped. "I respect your success," he said instead. Noah smiled bitterly. "That's not what I asked." Weeks blurred into months. The joint venture between Frostbite and Carter Industries became the talk of the tech world. Father and son reunite to revolutionize cybersecurity. The press loved it. Investors adored it. Neither of them did. Every interview was an act of theater. Richard spoke of mutual respect, Noah of shared vision. Behind the microphones, silence filled every car ride and corridor. One afternoon, they traveled together to Washington for a final round of government approvals. The meeting went well, professionally flawless, personally unbearable. On the flight home, turbulence shook the plane. The captain's calm voice said it was routine, But the jolt was enough to rip them both out of their practiced composure. Richard gripped the armrest, knuckles white. Noah glanced over, remembering childhood flights when his father used to rest a steadying hand on his shoulder. Now that same man sat beside him, small against the seat, a shadow of the Titan he once feared. When the turbulence eased, Richard let out a shaky breath. "Never liked flying," he muttered. Noah hesitated, then said quietly, "Neither did Mom." Richard blinked. "You remember that?" "I remember everything," Noah said. The words carried more weight than he meant them to. When they landed, a car waited. The silence between them lasted half the drive, until Richard finally spoke. He turned toward the door. As he reached for his coat, Richard spoke again, barely above a whisper. "Do you hate me?" Noah stopped, his back still to him. "No," he said. "I just don't need you anymore." He left without another word. Outside, snowflakes drifted through the air like static. The cold bit at his skin, but it didn't sting this time. He walked down the long driveway, each step a release. By the time he reached his car, his phone buzzed. A message from his mother. "I'm sorry." He's just scared of losing control. Noah typed back. He already did. He just doesn't know it yet. He didn't hit send. Instead, he pocketed the phone and looked up at the mansion glowing behind him. It looked smaller now, no longer the mountain he'd once tried to climb. Back in the house, Richard returned to the study. He poured himself another drink, but didn't touch it. On the desk lay the family photo Linda had been cleaning earlier. For a long time, he stared at the smiling boy beside him, the one he'd pushed away. His reflection in a glass looked older, lonelier. He whispered into the empty room, "I wanted you to be better than me." The house didn't answer. It never did. Noah drove through quiet streets lit by Christmas lights, their glow flickering against the windshield. He didn't feel victorious. He felt emptied out, like someone who had finally told the truth and learned that truth doesn't always heal. It just frees you. When he reached the city limits, he whispered to himself, "This time, I'll build something for me." And for the first time in years, he believed it. 2 months passed after the Christmas gala. The Carter mansion had returned to silence, but inside its walls, pride still haunted every room. Richard buried himself in work. Linda stopped asking if he had called Noah. And Noah? He threw himself deeper into frostbite, until fate dragged the two men back into orbit once more. It began with a contract. The Carter Group had been lobbying for a major government cybersecurity deal, one that would keep their aging empire relevant in a digital world. The bid was competitive, the requirements strict, and the decision final. When the results came in, Richard's assistant froze. "The contract went to Frostbite Technologies," she said, voice small. Richard's pen slipped from his hand. He didn't react, not outwardly. But inside, something twisted, the same bitter mix of pride and humiliation he'd been choking down since the launch. "Schedule a meeting," he said flatly, "with their CEO." His assistant blinked. "Sir, that's Noah Carter." "I know who he is," Richard snapped. A week later, father and son sat across from each other in Frostbite's glass conference room, surrounded by city skyline. Noah looked perfectly at home. Richard did not. "This could be mutually beneficial," Richard said, voice even. "I'm listening," Noah replied. "You have the contract. We have manufacturing capabilities and global reach. We could combine resources." Noah leaned back in his chair, studying him. "You mean you want in on what you once called a fantasy?" Richard's jaw tightened. "I underestimated your potential." "No," Noah said. "You dismissed it." Silence filled the room. Employees walking past slowed down, sensing the quiet tension that thickened the air. Finally, Noah spoke again. "I don't make business decisions out of pity, Dad." Richard exhaled through his nose. "I'm not asking for pity. I'm offering strategy." Noah tilted his head. "And I'm offering truth. You want this deal because your company is fading. I read the reports." His father's glare flickered between anger and shame. Watch your tone, son. I stopped being your son the night you locked the door behind me. The meeting ended with a handshake that meant nothing. But Frostbite's board later advised Noah to reconsider. Partnership with Carter Industries could open global channels. The logic was sound. The heart wasn't. For 2 days, Noah avoided the decision. He walked along the harbor, phone buzzing with reminders he ignored. He knew the right business move was to partner. He just didn't know if he could stomach sitting across from a man who'd once told him he'd never make it. By the 3rd day, he called his lawyer and said, "Draw up the joint venture papers." For the next 6 months, the Carters and Frostbite worked together, uneasily, professionally, constantly. Meetings, travel, shared presentations, forced proximity. Richard rarely spoke outside of strategy sessions. Noah kept everything polite, distant. To outsiders, they looked like a powerful duo. To anyone close enough to listen, their silence was almost visible. Linda watched from afar, sending occasional texts that Noah sometimes answered, sometimes didn't. She knew reconciliation had to happen on their terms, or not at all. At one meeting in D.C., late at night, after everyone else had gone, Richard walked into the conference room where Noah was reviewing numbers. "You're doing well," he said quietly. Noah didn't look up. "You said that last time." "Because it's true." Noah glanced up finally. "Then say you're proud of me." Richard hesitated. The words formed, but years of ego caught them before they escaped. "I respect your success," he said instead. Noah smiled bitterly. "That's not what I asked." Weeks blurred into months. The joint venture between Frostbite and Carter Industries became the talk of the tech world. Father and son reunite to revolutionize cybersecurity. The press loved it. Investors adored it. Neither of them did. Every interview was an act of theater. Richard spoke of mutual respect, Noah of shared vision. Behind the microphones, silence filled every car ride and corridor. One afternoon, they traveled together to Washington for a final round of government approvals. The meeting went well, professionally flawless, personally unbearable. On the flight home, turbulence shook the plane. The captain's calm voice said it was routine, but the jolt was enough to rip them both out of their practiced composure. Richard gripped the armrest, knuckles white. Noah glanced over, remembering childhood flights when his father used to rest a steadying hand on his shoulder. Now that same man sat beside him, small against the seat, a shadow of the titan he once feared. When the turbulence eased, Richard let out a shaky breath. "Never liked flying," he muttered. Noah hesitated, then said quietly, "Neither did Mom." Richard blinked. "You remember that." "I remember everything," Noah said. The words carried more weight than he meant them to. When they landed, a car waited. The silence between them lasted half the drive, until Richard finally spoke. "Do you ever think about what might have been different if I'd handled things another way?" Noah kept his eyes on the road ahead. "Every day. I thought I was pushing you toward greatness. You were pushing me away from it," Noah said softly. "You just didn't realize I'd find it on my own." Richard nodded, the smallest sign of surrender. "I can't undo it." "I know." The car slowed as they reached the city. Street lights flickered across their faces like old film. Richard said, almost to himself, "Your mother keeps telling me to say the words. I don't know how anymore." Noah looked out the window. "Start with 'I'm sorry.' The rest comes after." He didn't wait for a reply. A week later, Frostbite hosted a gala for the completion of the joint venture. Executives clinked glasses, investors smiled for photos, and Richard stood awkwardly on stage beside his son. When Noah gave his speech, he thanked his team, his investors, his mentors, but not his family. Still, when he finished, the crowd applauded, and Richard Carter, for the first time in his life, didn't hold back. He clapped until the sound hurt. Afterward, when most guests had left, he approached Noah at the bar. "You didn't mention me," he said quietly. Noah looked at him, expression unreadable. "You noticed." Richard's laugh was tired, self-deprecating. Guess I deserve that. Guess so. They stood in silence for a long moment. Then Richard placed a hand on his son's shoulder, tentative but real. I'm proud of you, he said finally. Noah didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was steady. I waited 5 years to hear that. Too bad it doesn't fix everything. Richard nodded. It's not supposed to. It's just a start. For the first time, Noah didn't pull away. That night, when the gala lights dimmed and the cameras packed up, father and son stood side by side at the window, looking down at the city both had built. One through legacy, the other through resilience. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. The silence between them, for once, didn't hurt. For a few short months, the partnership worked. The world called it the Carter-Frost Alliance, father and son bridging old steel and new code. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. Richard still carried secrets heavier than profit margins, and Noah sensed there was something left unsaid every time his father avoided question. It began one night in March, long after the offices had emptied. Noah was working late when he heard footsteps outside his glass door. Richard stood there, a man divided between duty and guilt. I need to talk, he said. Noah gestured to the chair across from him. Richard sat, staring at the city lights. Do you remember the Christmas before you left? How could I forget? Noah said quietly. I wasn't angry about your grades or your decision to drop out, Richard began. I was terrified. Noah frowned. Of what? Of losing you the way I lost my brother. He took a slow breath. When I was your age, your Uncle Daniel had a dream too. He wanted to start a small aviation company. I told him he was foolish. I told him family men don't take risks. He took out a loan anyway. The plane crashed 6 months later. I spent the next 30 years convincing myself I was right to stop people from chasing dreams. The words landed heavy, older than regret. I didn't throw you out because I hated you, Richard said. I did it because I thought dreams kill people. Noah leaned back, stunned. You never told me that. I couldn't, Richard admitted. If I did, it would mean admitting that fear, not strength, built everything I am. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the quiet hum of the servers in the next room. You tried to save me from something that wasn't yours to fix, Noah said softly. Richard nodded. And instead, I became the thing you needed saving from. The next day, Noah skipped the morning meetings and drove out of the city. He ended up at the old airfield outside Brookfield, the same one his uncle had used decades ago. It was empty now, just rusted hangars and wind howling through chain-link fences. He walked the cracked tarmac, thinking about all the years shaped by one man's fear and another's silence. He realized that every moment of his life had been a reaction to his father's rules, his family's rejection, his own anger. But reactions aren't the same as choices. He'd never truly chosen peace. That night he returned home and called his mother. She answered instantly, breath catching when she heard his voice. I know why he did it, Noah said. Linda was quiet for a beat. He finally told you. Yeah. Then maybe now you can forgive him. Maybe, he whispered. But forgiveness doesn't mean I forget. The following week, the Carters were scheduled to present their joint venture results at a private investor summit. It should have been routine, slides, speeches, polite applause. But beneath the calm surface, Noah sensed something building, a truth his father still hadn't told. During rehearsal, Richard seemed distracted. He shuffled papers, forgot key points, stumbled over numbers he normally recited from memory. When Noah asked if he was all right, Richard brushed it off. Just tired, he said. But Noah noticed the tremor in his hands. Later that night, Noah stopped by his father's hotel room to drop off some revised documents. The door was ajar. Inside, Richard sat alone at the desk, staring at a stack of letters. His eyes looked hollow, as though he'd been awake for days. Noah hesitated in the doorway. You okay? Richard didn't answer right away. When he finally looked up, there was a strange calm in his face, like a man about to finish something he'd started years ago. There's something you should know, he said quietly. The company, Carter Industries, it isn't as stable as it looks. Noah stepped inside. What do you mean? Richard exhaled. I took out massive loans 10 years ago to cover expansion costs. When the market dipped, I buried the losses under subsidiary names. If we don't secure the next round of contracts, everything collapses. The mansion, the stocks, everything your siblings depend on. Noah stared at him. Why are you telling me this now? Because I spent half my life teaching you that weakness is shameful. And it's killing me. I can't fix this alone. The admission didn't sound like defeat. It sounded like freedom. Noah sat down across from him. I can help, he said. Richard's brow furrowed. You bail me out. No, Noah said gently. I'll buy you time. Over the next few days, Noah quietly moved Frostbite funds to stabilize the Carter accounts, restructuring the deal to protect the company's employees without letting his father lose face publicly. He didn't tell anyone, not even Linda. The summit came and went smoothly. To the outside world, the Carter legacy looked untouchable. Only father and son knew the truth, that pride had nearly destroyed it, and humility had saved it. When it was over, Richard found Noah on the balcony, overlooking the city. I don't know how to thank you, he said. You don't have to, Noah replied. Yes, I do, because I've finally learned what legacy really means. He placed a hand over his heart. It isn't what you build, it's who you raise. Noah's throat tightened. For the first time in years, the words felt real. I forgive you, he said softly. Richard nodded. I know. They stood side by side, city lights shimmering below, no more lies between them. That night, Noah went home and opened his laptop. On the Frostbite homepage, under the About section, he added a single line beneath the mission statement. Built not from perfection, but from the lessons of those who loved me imperfectly. He hit save, then closed the screen. Outside, the sky glowed faintly before dawn, the color of forgiveness, thin and fragile, but real. Peace came quietly, not as an announcement, but as a rhythm. For the first time in years, Noah and Richard spoke without armor. Their conversations shifted from business to small things, weather, recipes, news stories neither really cared about, but both enjoyed pretending to. It began one Saturday morning when Richard appeared at Frostbite's headquarters carrying 2 coffees. The security guard almost didn't let him in. Old habits die hard. When Noah looked up from his laptop and saw his father holding out the cups like a peace offering, he couldn't help but laugh. You remember how I take it? Richard smiled faintly. I guessed. Still 2 sugars. Still 2 sugars. They stood there for a moment, both aware of how strange it felt to be doing something as ordinary as sharing coffee. Richard broke the silence. I thought maybe you could show me what you actually do here. Everyone keeps throwing around words like encryption modules and cyber defense architecture. I just nod like I understand. Noah gestured toward the glass wall of the operations floor. Come on, I'll give you the tour. For the next hour, Noah walked him through the hum of Frostbite's nerve center. Screens flickering with code, analysts monitoring live attacks, the pulse of digital defense made visible. Richard listened intently, the old businessman's curiosity waking up again. So, all of this started in a 1-bedroom apartment, he asked. Yeah, Noah said, right above a laundromat. The Wi-Fi used to drop every time someone ran the dryer. Richard chuckled. You really built an empire out of nothing. Noah smiled. Not nothing, just rejection. The words weren't bitter this time. They were fact. At the end of the tour, Richard paused in front of the Frostbite logo glowing on the wall. I used to think legacy was about whose name got carved on the building, he said. What do you think now? Noah asked. Legacy's about who you'd still be proud of if the building burned down. Noah didn't reply, but the small nod he gave said everything. That weekend, Noah invited his parents to dinner at his penthouse, something he hadn't done since moving out. Linda arrived with flowers and a nervous smile. Richard came 10 minutes late, holding a bottle of wine that looked like it had been waiting for the right occasion. They talked over pasta and candles. It wasn't easy. Awkward pauses still lingered. But there was laughter too. Soft, hesitant, real. At one point, Linda looked between them and said, "You two have the same stubborn look when you think you're right." They both turned to her, identical smirks forming without either meaning to. The room filled with quiet laughter. For a second, it felt like the Christmas dinners they'd lost. When she stepped into the kitchen, Richard leaned closer and said quietly, "Thank you for not shutting me out completely." Noah shrugged. "You raised me to finish what I start. Guess that includes family." After dinner, the Carters stayed longer than planned. Linda insisted on washing the dishes while Richard and Noah sat on the balcony, overlooking the skyline. The air smelled of rain and jasmine. The city below shimmered with 1,000 windows. For a while they spoke about nothing: sports scores, travel, the absurd price of coffee in airports. Then Richard's voice softened. "You know, I used to sit on this same balcony in your mother's apartment before we married. We dreamed about all the things we'd build. Somewhere along the way, I stopped dreaming." Noah watched him, surprised by the quiet honesty. "You don't have to stop now," he said. Richard smiled sadly. "Dreams look different at 60. These days I just want time I can't buy back." He took a sip of wine, then coughed once hard. It wasn't dramatic, but enough to make Noah sit up. "You okay?" "Fine," Richard said quickly, though the color had drained from his face. 10 minutes later, as Linda returned with coffee, Richard went pale again. He gripped the table's edge, breathing shallowly. "Noah, call someone," Linda said, panic breaking through her voice. The next hours blurred. Sirens, flashing lights, hospital corridors smelling of antiseptic and fear. Doctors called it a mild heart attack, caught early, treatable. Still, seeing his father wired to monitors stripped away the last layers of resentment Noah had been carrying. He sat beside the bed long after visiting hours ended. Richard stirred, eyes opening to the dim light. "Didn't think you'd wait around," he rasped. "Didn't think I'd get the chance," Noah answered. A ghost of a smile crossed Richard's face. "I suppose this is karma. Spent years trying to control everything. Now I can't even control my own heart." Noah reached for his hand. "Maybe that's what hearts are for, to remind us we're not in charge." For a long time neither spoke. Machines beeped steadily, keeping time with the silence between them. Richard recovered quickly, but the scare changed everything. He moved slower, spoke gentler, listened more. And Noah, for the first time, didn't see a tyrant or a teacher. He saw a man doing his best with the tools he had. When they left the hospital, Linda hugged Noah tight. "He needed you," she whispered. He looked over her shoulder at his father and said, "Maybe I needed him too." That week they visited the old Carter plant together. The smell of oil and steel filled the air, echoing memories of Noah's childhood. Richard walked beside him, pointing out machines he'd named after storms. "This one's Tempest, that one's Thunder." Noah laughed. "Still dramatic. Runs in the family," Richard replied. For the first time, the old building didn't feel haunted. It felt historic. They spent the afternoon talking with the workers, sharing stories, laughing about broken machinery and missed deadlines. It wasn't about control anymore. It was about connection. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Richard turned to him. "You know, for years I thought strength meant never apologizing. Turns out it means doing it until it finally sticks." Noah smiled. "Apology accepted, but you're buying dinner." Richard laughed. A real, full laugh that shook the dust off the years between them. For the first time in 5 years, peace looked possible. Frostbite thrived, the Carter factories were stable again, and father and son finally spoke without flinching. Then the headlines changed everything. It started with a single notification on Noah's phone. "Insider leak. Carter Group. Federal probe into fraudulent accounting practices." By noon the story was everywhere. Financial channels, tech blogs, local news tickers crawling beneath footage of the Carter mansion. An anonymous whistleblower had released documents showing that Carter Industries had manipulated numbers for years to hide losses. The same records Richard had confessed to Noah months earlier. Within hours, journalists camped outside Frostbite headquarters. Stocks tumbled. Reporters shouted questions that echoed through the lobby. Did Frostbite know? Is the father-son partnership a cover-up? Noah's board demanded answers. Investors called nonstop. For the first time since the crash that birthed his company, fear flooded him. Not for money, but for reputation. Everything he'd built, every ounce of credibility, now stood in the shadow of his father's past. When he reached the Carter house, the gates were open and flashing lights filled the driveway. Officers stood near the door. Investigators moved through the halls like ghosts. Richard sat in the study, risk-free but dignity handcuffed by circumstance. Linda looked up from the couch, eyes swollen. "They found the files," she said. "Old ones. Things from before your deal." Noah stepped closer. "Tell me this isn't what it looks like." Richard's silence said otherwise. "I told you about those loans," he said quietly. "I fixed what I could. But someone dug deeper. I didn't want you involved. You involved me the day you asked for help." Noah snapped. "Would you rather I lied again?" "I would rather you told me everything before I built my company on your name." The words cut both ways. Richard looked at the floor. "I was ashamed." By the next morning, the story had twisted further. Rumors claimed Frostbite had merged only to hide the Carter Group's debt. Pundits called Noah the prodigal son who inherited corruption. His inbox overflowed with cancellations. Partnerships postponed, events withdrawn. His PR team begged him to issue a statement. He refused, until he saw his employees' faces, fear replacing pride. He called a press conference. Standing before the cameras, Noah's voice stayed calm, though his pulse thundered. "My father made mistakes years before Frostbite existed," he said. "I won't defend those choices, but I will not let anyone erase the work of hundreds of honest people because of one man's fear." He paused. "Frostbite doesn't hide secrets. We protect others from them." The microphones clicked, the crowd murmured. Behind the cameras, Richard watched, unseen, guilt tightening his chest. The investigation consumed the next few weeks. Every phone call, every meeting, every quiet moment became another question about trust. Frostbite's name stayed on the front page, tied to scandal it hadn't created. And Richard Carter, once the face of success, became the symbol of deceit. Noah avoided the cameras, but he couldn't avoid the ache. He worked late every night, fixing contracts, reassuring partners, salvaging what he could. And yet, every time he saw his reflection in the office glass, he saw his father staring back, older, guilt-ridden, stubborn. One night, near midnight, he found Richard waiting in the Frostbite lobby. He looked smaller somehow. The proud man finally cracked open. "I signed the plea deal," Richard said. Noah froze. "What?" "I'll take full responsibility. It'll clear Frostbite of liability. You'll lose everything." "I already did, son." Noah stepped closer, voice shaking. "You don't have to do this for me." Richard smiled faintly. "I'm not. I'm doing it for who I should have been." He handed Noah an envelope, financial documents transferring the last of the Carter Group shares to Frostbite. "Keep the workers. Keep the name alive. Just not mine." Before Noah could respond, Richard was already walking toward the waiting car outside. The red taillights bled across the glass like a closing wound. Days later, the news broke. Richard Carter pleads guilty to financial misconduct. Frostbite cleared of involvement. Public sympathy shifted instantly. Headlines changed tone, calling it a father's sacrifice and a son's redemption. But for Noah, the victory felt like loss. He sat in his office, surrounded by flowers, letters, and noise that meant nothing. The company was safe, the scandal over, but his father faced sentencing, and silence filled the space between them again. Linda visited one evening, placing her hand on his shoulder. "He finally learned how to protect you," she said softly. "He didn't have to burn everything to prove it," Noah whispered. "Maybe that's how he makes peace, with ashes instead of apologies." Noah closed his eyes, the weight of grief pressing behind them. For the first time since he'd built Frostbite, he wanted nothing more than to stop building and just breathe. On the day of sentencing, Noah stood outside the courthouse. Reporters swarmed, flashbulbs stung, voices shouted questions that blurred into static. Richard turned once before entering, catching his son's gaze through the chaos. No words passed between them, just a small nod, quiet and sure. When the doors closed, Noah exhaled slowly. He realized forgiveness isn't a finish line. It's a door you keep opening, even when it hurts. He left the courthouse that day not angry, not broken, just human. That evening, he drove back to Frostbite and walked through the empty office floors. Screens hummed softly in the dark, blue light reflecting off the windows. He looked at the logo, his company, his creation, and whispered, "We'll be okay." Outside, snow began to fall again, quiet and forgiving, just like the night his story had started. A week after the sentencing, the world moved on. News tickers changed stories, investors chased new headlines, and Frostbite returned to its quiet hum. But Noah Carter didn't feel the victory people congratulated him for. He felt hollow, like a building that looked beautiful outside but echoed inside. He started spending his mornings walking along the river. It was the same path he'd taken when he first dreamed of Frostbite, back when survival meant creation. Now survival meant letting go. One morning, his assistant handed him an envelope. "No return address," she said. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a folded photograph. The photo showed a younger Richard and Noah standing in front of the Carter plant, both smiling, both unaware of the years waiting to break them apart. The note beneath, it was written in Richard's unmistakable handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means I'm finally learning what silence can't say. I spent my life building walls made of expectation and calling them homes. You tore yours down and built something worth living in. Whatever you do next, do it because it brings you peace, not because it proves me wrong." "Dad." Noah read it twice. Then again. Each time, the words felt lighter, like the weight of old resentment turning to dust. That evening, he called his mother. She answered on the first ring, her voice soft and tired. "He wrote to you too, didn't he?" "He did," Noah said. "Then you know what he was trying to say." "Yeah, took him a lifetime to say it." "Took both of you," she whispered. He closed his eyes. "How's he holding up?" "They'll transfer him next week. Minimum security. He'll be fine, Noah. He's finally resting." For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Linda said, "What are you going to do now?" Noah looked out over the skyline, the Frostbite tower glowing faint blue in the distance. "I don't know," he said, "but I think it's time I stopped chasing ghosts." The next morning, Noah gathered his board and announced his decision. "I'm stepping down as CEO," he said. Gasps filled the room. "I'm not leaving the company," he continued. "I'm letting it breathe without me. I built Frostbite to protect others, not to prove myself." He handed leadership to Elena Price, the same investor who had taken a chance on him years before. She blinked, surprised. "You're really ready to let go?" For the first time, Noah said, smiling, "Yeah." After the meeting, he walked through the office one last time, stopping beside the Frostbite logo. He traced a finger across the cool metal and whispered, "You're safe now." 3 days later, Noah drove 2 hours south to the correctional facility. It was a gray building tucked between pine trees and silence. He waited in the visitation room, hands clasped, heart steady but heavy. When the door opened, Richard entered wearing a plain blue uniform, not the tailored suits that had once defined him. He looked thinner, but not defeated, more human than Noah had ever seen him. They sat across from each other, glass and time between them. "You came," Richard said. I wasn't sure I would, Noah replied. Richard gave a small smile. That makes two of us. For a while, neither spoke. Then Noah slid the letter across the table. I got you, Noah. Richard nodded. I meant every word. I know. I just wanted you to hear something in person. He took a breath. I forgive you, Dad. Not because it fixes anything, but because I don't want to spend the rest of my life angry. Richard's eyes shimmered. You sound like your mother. She sounds like peace, Noah said. They talked for nearly an hour, about old memories, about Linda, about how Frostbite was thriving without him. Richard listened more than he spoke. Before the guard signaled time, he leaned forward. Don't let my mistakes make you afraid of family, he said. I'm not, Noah answered. They made me want to do better. Richard smiled faintly. Then I did one thing right. When Noah stood to leave, Richard raised a trembling hand against the glass. Noah mirrored it. For a moment, the years between them disappeared. No titles, no anger, no pride. Just a father and son learning how to say goodbye without words. Outside, the air smelled of rain and earth. Noah walked to his car, exhaling a lifetime he hadn't realized he'd been holding in. He didn't feel broken anymore. He felt free. On the drive back, he passed the old Carter factory. The windows were boarded, the paint faded, but sunlight caught the edges just right, turning decay into something almost beautiful. He smiled. Some things didn't need rebuilding. They just needed remembering. Weeks later, he stood at the Frostbite Tower one last time before handing over his office keys. Elena met him in the lobby. You sure you're ready for quiet? She teased. I think quiet's been waiting for me, he said. He left the building without looking back. For the first time since that snowy night years ago, he wasn't walking away in anger. He was walking toward peace. At sunset, he visited his mother. They sat on the porch, watching the sky turn gold. Linda rested her head on his shoulder. Your father would be proud, she said. I think he finally is, Noah replied. That night, as snow began to fall outside her window, Noah smiled at its quiet descent. He thought about the boy who'd been kicked out at Christmas and the man who'd come home anyway. Not to prove anything, but to forgive. Some stories end in triumph. His ended in understanding. Spring arrived quietly. For the first time in years, Noah Carter woke without an alarm or a meeting on his calendar. The skyline that had once ruled his days now shimmered in the distance while he brewed coffee in a small coastal cottage miles away from everything he used to chase. He bought the place with no press release, no fanfare, just a key and the promise of stillness. The ocean sat a few hundred feet from his porch, steady and endless. He worked only when he wanted to, designing open-source security tools for schools and nonprofits. Frostbite flourished under Elena's leadership, and every quarterly report reminded him that letting go had been the right choice. Sometimes he visited the local high school to talk to students about perseverance. He never mentioned the millions, or the scandals, or the empire. He just said, what people call failure is usually the start of your real education. The kids listened, maybe because they could see the peace he carried instead of the power he once chased. One Saturday, he received a letter from the facility. It was short, just 3 sentences from Richard. They say release comes in 2 forms, walking out or being forgiven. You gave me both. I'm coming home soon. Noah read it twice, folded it neatly, and placed it on the table beside a photo of all 3 of them from years ago. He didn't cry. He just smiled, the kind that comes when old pain finally turns into gratitude. A week later, Linda and Richard visited the cottage. Richard moved slower but lighter, his eyes softer, his hand steady. They sat on the porch together, sharing coffee as gulls wheeled overhead. Richard looked out at the water. You found peace, didn't you? Noah nodded. I stopped fighting to prove I was right. Richard chuckled. Wish someone had told me earlier that pride costs more than failure. Linda squeezed both their hands. This is all I ever wanted, she said. Not the money, not the company. Just this. They sat until the sun dipped below the horizon. No speeches, no apologies, just quiet understanding. Months slipped by in easy rhythm. Noah planted herbs behind the cottage, learned the tide schedule, memorized the sound of peace. Sometimes he visited the city to meet Elena and check on Frostbite's progress. Every time, she'd smile and say, "You know, you left a legacy without even trying." He'd answer, "That's the only kind worth leaving." He donated a portion of his shares to fund scholarships for young inventors, the dreamers who couldn't afford to fail. He called the program the Carter Fellowship. Reporters wanted interviews, but he declined them all. He didn't need the world to know. He just wanted the world to continue. One evening he walked the shoreline, wind cool against his face, phone buzzing with a new message. It was from an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Carter, I got the fellowship. Thank you. My dad didn't believe in me, but you did." Noah smiled, pocketing the phone. The circle had closed. He turned back toward the cottage, where lights glowed warm behind the windows. Linda and Richard were inside, cooking dinner, bickering playfully about seasoning. Their laughter drifted through the night air. For a moment, he just watched them, realizing that the boy who'd once been kicked out at Christmas had built something stronger than a company. He'd rebuilt a family. He stepped inside. Richard looked up from the stove and said, "You're late, partner." Noah grinned. Traffic on the beach. They laughed, and for once, the sound didn't hide regret. It carried joy. Later, as they ate together, Noah raised his glass. "To second chances," he said. Richard met his eyes. "To forgiveness." Linda added softly, "to coming home." They clinked glasses. Outside, snow began to fall, rare for the coast, gentle and bright under the porch light. Noah looked out at it, remembering another snowfall long ago, the night everything had fallen apart. He smiled and whispered, "Guess the storm finally cleared." Some stories end with revenge. This one ends with peace. Noah learned that wealth can build walls, but forgiveness builds bridges that last longer than any empire. Now tell me, if you were given a second chance to heal what once broke you, would you take it? Drop your thoughts below in the comments. And if Noah's journey moved you, hit like, share this story with someone who needs hope tonight, and subscribe for more true-to-life tales that remind us every ending can still become a beginning.
Thank you so much for watching till the very end. I hope you truly felt this story as much as I did telling it. We've got plenty more powerful stories waiting for you, so don't stop here. Just click on the video showing on your screen right now and keep the journey going. I'll see you in the next one.